It's 2 a.m. and you're still awake. Not because you can't sleep, but because your mind won't stop replaying the conversation from earlier today. That moment when your colleague said, "Interesting choice," about your presentation approach. What did they really mean? Were they being supportive or subtly critical? You analyze their tone, their facial expression, the exact emphasis they placed on the word interesting. 3 hours have passed and you're no closer to an answer, but you can't let it go. This is what your nights look like. This is what your mind does. You've always been told you're thoughtful, conscientious, detail-oriented. People admire how thoroughly you consider things, how you never rush into decisions. What they don't see is the paralysis, the endless loop of scenarios that plays in your head before you send a simple text message, the 20 different ways you rehearse asking for what you need, only to say nothing at all. The exhaustion of living in a mind that never stops interrogating every moment, every choice, every possible outcome. From the outside, you might seem careful, measured, perhaps a bit quiet. You are the person who takes time to respond, who thinks before speaking, who considers all angles. Some interpret this as wisdom, but inside, it's not peaceful deliberation, it's chaos, a relentless storm of what-ifs and should-haves, of imagined catastrophes and anticipated rejections. You're not carefully weighing options, you're trapped in a maze of your own construction, walking the same corridors over and over, searching for an exit that might not exist.
This pattern has a name, though knowing it doesn't always make it easier to escape. Psychologists recognize chronic overthinking as a form of cognitive perseveration, the inability to stop a particular thought pattern even when it's no longer useful or relevant. It often develops as a coping mechanism, usually in childhood, when you learned that thinking through every possibility might protect you from criticism, rejection, or failure. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where mistakes were met with disproportionate consequences, where you had to constantly read the emotional temperature of a room, anticipate a parent's mood, or find safety in prediction and control. Your young mind concluded that if you could just think hard enough, analyze thoroughly enough, you could avoid pain. And so you became a student of every micro-expression, every tonal shift, every possible interpretation. You developed a hyperactive threat detection system, one that never quite learned to turn off. What started as survival became your default mode. Your brain confused exhaustive analysis with actual safety, rumination with problem solving. You've been running this program for so long, you've forgotten there was ever another way to think. The cruel irony is that all this thinking rarely leads to better decisions. In fact, research on decision-making shows that overthinking typically degrades the quality of choices. When you analyze past a certain point, you lose access to intuitive wisdom, to the gut feelings that actually integrate far more information than conscious thought ever could. But you can't trust that. Trusting feels reckless, impulsive, dangerous. Every day unfolds as a series of internal negotiations. You wake up and immediately start processing what you need to accomplish, how people might react, what could go wrong. At breakfast, you're not tasting your coffee. You're already 3 steps ahead, mentally drafting the email you need to send, imagining how it might be misinterpreted, revising it before you've written a single word. At work, a simple question from your manager, "Do you have a minute?" triggers an immediate cascade. Your stomach drops. You mentally review every project, every interaction, searching for what you might have done wrong. In the 60 seconds it takes to reach their office, you've constructed and deconstructed 5 different scenarios, prepared defenses, imagined consequences. They want to ask about your availability for a meeting next week. The relief lasts only until the next trigger.
You spend an extraordinary amount of mental energy trying to read minds. When someone doesn't respond to your message immediately, you don't think they're probably busy. You think they're angry. You've said something wrong. They're reconsidering the friendship. You've been too much or not enough. You review the conversation, searching for evidence. You craft and delete 3 different follow-up messages. Each possibility feels equally real, equally urgent to resolve. In social situations, you're only partially present. Part of you is engaged in conversation, another part is watching yourself from the outside, monitoring your performance. Did that joke land? Was that story too long? Are you talking too much or too little? You notice someone glance at their phone and immediately wonder if you're boring them. The next day, you'll replay the entire evening, cataloging every moment of potential awkwardness, building a case against yourself that no defense attorney could overcome. Decision-making becomes an ordeal. Choosing a restaurant for dinner with friends can consume hours. You research reviews, consider everyone's preferences, worry about price points, imagine scenarios where your choice disappoints someone. By the time you finally suggest something, you're already apologizing for it. The bigger decisions, career changes, relationship commitments, where to live, can paralyze you for months or years. There's always one more factor to consider, one more angle to examine, one more possible future to imagine. Your relationships suffer in specific ways. Intimacy requires a degree of spontaneity, of unself-conscious presence that feels impossible when you're constantly monitoring and adjusting. When someone says, "I love you," you can't simply receive it. You immediately wonder why they said it that way, what they expect in return, whether they really mean it, what happens if you disappoint them. You're so busy analyzing the moment that you miss actually experiencing it. You struggle with vulnerability because vulnerability means relinquishing control, and control is what all this thinking is supposedly buying you. If someone asks, "What's wrong?" you can't simply say what you feel. You have to first figure out whether it's safe to share, how they might respond, whether you're being too sensitive, if you have the right to feel this way, what the consequences might be. By the time you've thought it through, the moment has passed, and you say, "Nothing, I'm fine." Your body keeps score even when your mind won't rest. There's a constant tension in your shoulders, a tightness in your chest that you've learned to live with. You clench your jaw without realizing it. Sleep is difficult because your brain treats bedtime as finally having time to process everything you've been storing all day. The moment you lie down, the thoughts arrive like they've been waiting. Every conversation, every decision, every worry you postponed. You're exhausted, but exhaustion isn't enough to quiet the noise. Over time, something starts to erode. It's not dramatic, you don't fall apart. Instead, there's a gradual fading of aliveness. Spontaneity dies first because spontaneity is incompatible with constant analysis. Then joy becomes muted because you can't fully feel pleasure when you're simultaneously analyzing whether you deserve it, whether it will last, what it might cost you. Confidence withers because no amount of thinking ever makes you feel truly prepared. You become a spectator in your own life, watching yourself perform, always one step removed from direct experience. The saddest part is that all this mental labor produces so little. You don't actually gain more control, you just exhaust yourself trying. The future remains uncertain no matter how many scenarios you imagine. People's thoughts stay mysterious no matter how carefully you analyze their words. The past doesn't change no matter how many times you replay it, revise what you said, imagine what you should have done differently. What you're losing isn't just peace of mind. You're losing time, presence, the texture of actual lived experience. You're losing the possibility of surprise, of discovery, of the strange wisdom that comes from not knowing. You're teaching everyone around you that you're not quite available, not quite here, always partly somewhere else, in the past you're reviewing or the future you're trying to predict. Here's what you need to understand. This pattern isn't protecting you. It never was. It's the opposite of safety. It's a prison where you're both the guard and the prisoner, constantly checking and rechecking locks that don't actually keep anything out. You have a choice, though it won't feel comfortable at first. You can begin to notice the overthinking when it starts. Name it for what it is. Not insight, not problem solving, but a loop, a habit, a fear response that's outlived its usefulness. You can practice tolerating the discomfort of not knowing, of not having analyzed every angle, of taking action before you feel completely certain. This might mean therapy, particularly approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy or mindfulness-based practices that help interrupt rumination patterns. It means learning to distinguish between productive reflection and destructive repetition. It means catching yourself the 5th time you're replaying a conversation and gently saying, "I'm thinking about this again. What would happen if I stopped?" It means taking small risks with uncertainty, sending the message without rereading it 17 times, making the small decision quickly, sitting with the discomfort of not knowing what someone meant and not immediately trying to figure it out. These feel reckless at first. Your anxiety will spike. Your brain will insist that this is dangerous, that you need to think more. But slowly, you might notice something. The catastrophes you imagined rarely materialize. Life continues, and in the space where overthinking used to be, there's room for something else. Maybe peace, maybe presence, maybe just a little more breathing room. The goal isn't to stop thinking altogether. Thoughtfulness is a gift. Reflection has value. But there's a difference between thinking and being held hostage by thought. The former serves you. The latter consumes you. You don't have to figure out everything right now. You don't have to have the perfect insight or the complete answer. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply close the loop, not because you've solved it, but because you're choosing to move forward anyway. The courage isn't in thinking harder, it's in finally allowing yourself to stop.